Alright, so we're going to go over the marble buttercream technique. So what you need to start is a plain bowl of your color and a plain bowl of white and an empty bowl. So what you're going to do is just gently take some of the color of your choice, take some of the white, and just gently mix them together, kind of folding them. If you want more white marbling, you'll want to add more white, and if you want more color, then you're going to want to use more color. So we're going to take that marbling that we just did, and we're going to apply it to the acetate paper. So what you can do at this point is actually check to see if you're liking the marbling.
That's good.
So if you're liking the marbling, then you can keep on going. But if you don't like it, then you can kind of adjust your ratios. So I'm gonna add the next section. And while I'm doing the buttercream additions, I'm also paying attention to how this top section is going, depending on what style or design I want on my cake. So I did actually measure this to the top of the cake, so I know I don't want it to go all the way to the top. I just want it to come partially down, so that's why I'm not going all the way to the top, but I am going all the way to the bottom, since I do want it to come to the bottom of my cake. So I typically marble a little bit at a time so that it doesn't get too mixed up as I'm going. So I'm going to again kind of fold these colors together. So I'll go ahead and take those folded colors and again apply it to my acetate paper. So I like to check the progress pretty frequently. So I'll look at how the marbling is going. And so there's actually a section here that I don't like. So I'm actually going to scrape that section off and redo that section. So again, we'll check for progress. So at this point, this has gotten a little bit too mixed up for me, so I'm going to kind of leave that section alone and add some more color and some more white, and try to fold those together and get some more white in there, and then continue to apply. So since I am working with a lighter color, it is a little bit harder to see the marbling. But if you look at one of my other blue cakes, you will see that the marbling is a lot more pronounced since that color is a lot darker. And because we are using acetate paper, you do want it to be a little bit thicker, otherwise it will not stick to the cake and then it'll actually peel off on the acetate paper. So what I'm gonna do at the end here is actually add another layer to make it a little bit thicker so that it doesn't peel off the cake. And so I actually know for my cake, when I measured it, it is a little bit long, so it will overlap, but I do want this end and this end where it's gonna actually get to the end point to match so that I can't necessarily tell where the 2 points connect when I do my cake. So I'll actually build this part up to try to match it to this part over here.
Seems good on here.
So I'll check it again before I put it on just to make sure there are no parts that I don't like and that I want to take off. So I do want to see a little bit of a stronger wave here. So I'm going to go ahead and increase this. Just to create a little bit more chaos. And then I am going to add thickness with my extra buttercream. And I only chose to use 2 colors, but you can choose to use as many colors as you want to. Just keep in mind the blending of some colors will create another color, so keep that color theory in mind as you're picking your colors. I like to keep it to 2 colors, but I've seen a lot of pretty cakes that use more than 2 colors. So none of this side will show, so I'm just adding that additional thickness. And then I tend to kind of forget to add thickness to the bottom, so I'm going to go back and kind of smooth out and add some of that thickness all around. Okay, so now what you're going to do is get your cake out of the freezer, so you want to make sure it is chilled to the touch and a little firm. And you're going to find the back of your cake, maybe like where you have a seam from doing your smoothing. If you don't, that's fine, but so for me, I'm going to select the back of my cake and then actually take the buttercream marble that I've done and hug it to the cake, so that these 2 end seams end up at the back of the cake. So the back of the cake will be facing me. So what I'm going to do is make sure that it is on touching the bottom of the cake board, and then kind of slowly just hug it to me until I get that the acetate paper to meet. I must have measured wrong. It doesn't meet.
I was supposed to say, I thought you said it meets.
So my dad always used to tell me measure twice, cut once, but I measured once and did not measure twice. So I actually have a gap with mine, but you should make sure that when you're doing it, you make sure that these actually meet. So what I'm gonna do to kind of correct that is just push the buttercream out of it a little bit so that it does end up meeting. And then I'm actually gonna use this fondant smoother to make sure all the buttercream is pressed nice and firmly up against the cake. So I'm kind of gonna look down the middle, and actually I see some spots where I probably didn't do it thick enough and it may not stick to the cake. So that'll be something that as you do it more and more, you can kind of tell how to do that better. So I'll just have those meet like this, and then I'll correct that with a scraper at the end.
Let me zoom in.
So the parts that are not meeting for me are the peaks, which I didn't do quite thick enough. So I'm trying to press those peaks up against the cake to try to get them to meet a little bit better. But since the acetate is a little firmer, it isn't as giving as the wax paper. So it will tend to pull that buttercream away if it's not as thick as it needs to be. So hopefully I've pressed it up against it enough to make it stick. So what we're gonna do now is put it in the freezer for about 5 to 10 minutes until this hardens so that I can remove the acetate paper. Okay, so now comes the fun part where you get to take off the acetate paper and hope that everything goes to plan. So just slowly peel it back. So far all the buttercream is sticking. And then you can either reuse that or throw it away. And then I do still have the lumps over here. So what I'm gonna do is try to scrape those off. And I might need to wait for my buttercream to soften a little bit more before I can get that all the way down. But I'll basically just kind of scrape that until it reaches a point where it's level with the rest of the frosting. And then what I actually like to do is also kind of take the scraper just gently around the rest of the cake. And I do this when it's cold so I don't really smear the frosting too much, but this will really help to get rid of kind of that fuzzy look from taking it off of the acetate paper. So you can kind of see how the marbling turned out, and there are some places that are thicker than others, so that's just based on how you smoothed it out when you're putting it on the acetate paper. So I didn't do the best job because I have some thicker spots and some thinner spots, so that's something just to pay attention to while you're working on your cakes. And then I do still need to smooth that down, but what I'll wait to do is for that to get a little bit softer. Oops, so that I'm not breaking my cake. So then the next step will be to paint the cake, and this is only if you're doing this method, but you can do any kind of design that you want to do. But I like to take some sunflower dust and mix it with vodka. So I like to keep my dusts, my sunflower dust, in these little paint containers so that way I don't waste any. So I mixed it with vodka, and then I'll find the back, and I like to start at the back and just kind of start to paint the edges. So I'm not super particular, but just kind of roughly go over the edge of that buttercream. So you can see I have kind of smoothed that out a little bit. I will probably continue to work on this just to get it down, but for the sake of this video, that's essentially how you make a marble buttercream cake and actually do the marbling process. A couple notes on that though, you can actually choose to marble the color by just putting color drops into the white and then slowly mixing it, so you do have a little bit more variation in the color. You can see I have pretty much one tone of color through here, but if you do the mixing of the color into the bowl kind of slowly and not mix it all the way up, that will kind of produce a different effect, which I will show you guys in a different video. It doesn't work super well with the light colors because I didn't really like the darker of the light color from the gel that actually got mixed into the white, so I decided to mix it fully instead of partially. But that is a marble buttercream cake.